I thought we could just go around and just maybe say a little something, just very short, one sentence about either how this week's reading grabbed you or just the Bible in general, your relationship with it. We won't start with you. We'll start with Dave.
How this reading grabbed me, or I mean, it's I feel like we're beating a dead horse, but we talked so much about homogenizing the four gospels, but this is a particularly difficult time in which to do them. To take these four very different accounts of the crucifixion and kind of mush them all together into one chapter. So I had a difficult time reading it. I found it jarring because it doesn't flow the way that the four gospels on their own kind of flow through their own narrative. So,
and I can't remember because I can't remember what parts we have read in here and what parts are in the Bible. So anyway, that's my own confusion.
Yeah.
This is Sean, so we're just introducing ourselves, first name and either what grabs you about the Bible in general or about this specific chapter. Or nothing, you can pass.
Pass. I'm Kim.
But do share your name.
I'm Kim, and actually, I'm learning quite a bit. I do this about the Bible and the flow of it. Is helping me. I didn't realize that it's always been sections with it, so now I'm actually sort of timeline back.
I love that. Yeah, the connections, the art. I love the little arts.
Hi, I'm Henry Russell, and this is the first time I've ever studied the Bible because I'm an ex-Catholic and we don't study the Bible. so I'm learning about the historical. I really am very interested in the history of all this because I'm very interested. And then, of course, the deeper meaning of things, which, of course, the priest helped me.
Hi, I'm Lulu Robert, and my story is much like Peggy's, except I wasn't Catholic. I just somehow did not have a very comprehensive learning of Bible. So this is helping.
Hi, I'm Ralph. My take on this was, on the one hand, I liked it because it did show a certain condensed continuity that was easy to follow all events. But on the other hand, it was like four people that watched the same event and described it differently. And so that was kind of interesting. Again, I like that whole historical context. It's practically explaining what it was.
I'm Sharon Already, and the book, some of it kind of confused me, and the way it described when he was crucified, said in the gospel, but it goes into great detail on what happened. And if I'm studying the New Testament, I'm fixing to read more. So I'm anxious to learn more. But I'm still it's emotional.
It is emotional. It's very emotional.
I'm Tony, and I appreciate this book because it reinforces things that I mean,
You want to just tell us?
Thank you guys for welcoming me. My name is June, and I'm a new reborn Christian. I was a raised Christian. I was baptized once here at the Christ Savior and Surrender. And then in January of the year, the Lord gave me permit to actually only read this Bible that I thought me was 20, and I'm almost 30. And I finally, this year, I always try to read it. I finally actually read it, and then with even understanding what And then as I was going back and rereading Matthew, rereading Luke, rereading, I just started falling in love. Then I started being fall in love with the word and understand what I was reading. So what I'm excited about taking this education class with you guys is that I want to know what I don't know. And then I want to know if I do know what I think I know. Right? So I'm still an infant in my walk with Christ. You know, I'm a student. And everything that I learned, I'm so eager to want to share it and like teach it and, you know, give it to them. So I just appreciate being here and you guys being vulnerable too and saying, hey, I don't really know the Bible, you know, and that's okay too. Yeah.
And we've got a few more people who walked in. Since this is Chong's first time with us, I thought we'd just say our first name and either a little something about how this chapter struck us or about our relationship with the Bible or Pat's. But just do say your name. Abby.
Oh, I'm Abby Britwell, and actually this time, the first part of the chapter, I kind of somehow saw it in a different light. So you may always see the Bible in a different light too when you read it. Yeah. So not only the God and the man in that part, because I forget the man a lot.
In Jesus. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what you know. King and Karen.
I'm King. And I like this book because it breaks down the Bible piece by piece. And I get overwhelmed when I look at the whole Bible. I say, God, I can read this. And then when you see this, well, yeah, it's just, I like it.
And I'm Karen. And I've just thoroughly have enjoyed this because I've forgotten a lot of things or it brings up new things. It's always fun to learn.
Karen, I love how your book is filled with notes. There's sticky notes, hard papers. I love that.
Yeah, for real.
Well used.
Oh, yeah. And my name is Claire, and I feel like I'm always a beginner with the Bible. I mean, I know I'm not always a basic beginner, maybe, but I guess and I feel that way about faith sometimes too. I'm always learning, and always a beginner. So there we go. Okay, so we're on chapter 19 with I don't know, just the daunting title, right? Crucify Him. How many of y'all here have walked through all the Holy Week services? So come to Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Sunday. Well, I'll start with Palm Sunday. So if you've done that, this is familiar to you, right? Because what's one of the kind of jarring things about Palm Sunday and Maundy, Thursday that involves the words crucify Him? If you remember, is we all shout them as a congregation.
Yes.
We all shout the words crucify Him about Jesus. And so we all are admitting kind of a little complicity in that, even though we weren't there. And maybe it invites us to ponder how we might be complicit in that. And I find that really interesting that we all proclaim it together, especially because I think the Gospels are pretty clear that it's the religious leadership that orchestrates Jesus' crucifixion. But the crowd certainly kind of gets ramped up, eggs it on. So I just want to acknowledge that this is, as Sharon said, it's emotional material, it's difficult material. I remember, this has been years ago now, but I used to skip Good Friday because it was just too depressing. And now at least I can realize the gift of walking through it, even though it's hard, like our college says. So anyway, I don't have really too much of a structure for today, but I thought I'd just open it up. And it looks like some of y'all brought certain either questions or issues that struck you. So Abby, I'm gonna call on you because you talked about the God and the man and Jesus.
Well, yes, it seemed to me, as I read, that first part, that goes in as the Son of God in this triumphal entry. But then he seems to be determined, perhaps so as a man, to let them finally understand that the leadership is leading them in the wrong direction. And that the people need to turn to Jesus and his love instead of all this other stuff. I mean, I thought this was terribly emotional in here, in that he wants to be with his friends, of course, but he also then knows that they're going to desert him. So it's and then when she anoints him with the oil, it seemed to me that imagine he had mixed emotions about, well, that's like you do for somebody who's dying. So I guess this will be the end. And it just, as I say, I was thinking more of the man's emotions.
Yeah.
During all of that.
And that's important. That's important for our own lives, right? For the times when we're desolate, when we're betrayed. I'll never forget a friend of mine a long time ago, it's probably been 30 years ago, I heard him say this. He was an Episcopal priest. He lost two younger brothers when they were all children, lost two younger brothers to basically medical errors, healthcare errors. And the only way he could not necessarily make sense of it, but I guess part of the healing for him was realizing that Jesus was with them through such desolation, both the brothers and the family as a whole, as they grieve and carrying them through that. I wonder if maybe it's only those difficult times that we can really relate to this. Do you want to say a word about the triumphal entry that you mentioned that this chapter starts off with? It's so fascinating because it's right around the time of Passover when lots of people are coming to Jerusalem, lots of crowds. And so the Roman government is really worried about crowd control, right? And Pilate didn't always hang out in Jerusalem. He had, several different places that he was. And it's entirely possible that Pilate, either around the same time or on the same day as Jesus is entering Jerusalem on a donkey with clothes and palm branches that people have thrown out for him. That's his own triumphal entry. Pilate's entering the other side on his war horse with all his soldiers and his retinue, right? It's a really powerful spirit contrast coming in through different gates and with different kinds of power. One, a lasting power, Christ's power, God's power, the resurrection power, the power of laying down one's life, and one with what looks like and feels like ultimate power when you're the victim of it. You want to say anything about that?
No, I think that's a really interesting point. I think that Jesus' entry is also intended to evoke David's entry into Jerusalem. And so, there's he's doing a lot to provoke people that you really don't want to provoke. he's coming in looking like King David. He's being called as the king who comes in the name of the Lord. Then he pretty much goes straight to the temple and starts hollering at people. So this is not going to end well.
And he doesn't, he's clear about that. He's clear it's not going to end.
Yeah.
But he knows, it needs to be done.
I have just one of the things that you're always the person that looks at words and then looks at their historical meaning and time. So you don't, but,
No, I'm happy to defer. Yeah, to recognize it.
well, no, I'm just, in this, for whatever reason, I refer to as a cult.
Mm.
Yeah. I think so.
Well, was it really a cult like a baby horse? A newborn, or was it really a donkey? Because as a metaphor, a donkey is an animal, at least it's very, it serves as well, and then at the end, we just kill it. Sorry, I'm getting a little, but really, it's an animal that we mistreat a lot.
Well, yeah.
Animals.
Well, it's not so interesting. If it is a cult, are you saying like a horse or a donkey?
I mean, they're both cults, I understand.
Right. No, I get that. But I'm thinking, and it may be, this is why I brought my parallel Bible in here. To see what the word is in other versions, other gospels. But if it is a horse, a cult, a young horse, this is Jesus' war horse. I mean, the equivalent of the war horse that pilots and his folks are riding on. So that's a fascinating contrast. Right.
I'm guessing it did use, did you see it?
No, when I'm in class, I keep focusing.
And really, another, one of the things that I think about as well is Absalom, who was a pretender to the throne, and who was riding on a donkey when he got caught in the branches and was killed. So there, a donkey bore a so-called kingdom to his death. Here as well. Well, you go ahead. I'll try and see if I can find it.
It doesn't surprise me about cults. I had horses growing up. I had a donkey that was 32 years old, but I also had a colt donkey, small, but very strong. I could ride him. I was in the 5th grade, 6th grade. You could ride that colt. I don't know what people weighed in those days. They didn't eat much, so they didn't weigh much. No, but I was thinking about those animals. Read about them.
Yeah.
So much struck that you. And he got right on it. It didn't bug him, give him any trouble. And when I broke his horse and landed on my head. Several times. So
that's very fascinating. It's a little bit like Christ, the Lord of sea and sky and creation, maybe in like the stilling of the waters, on the Sea of Galilee, the big swamping waters, and this would be another connection to this cult or donkey knows his creator.
yeah.
Right. There's so many layers to this.
Yeah.
So in Matthew, in Mark and Luke, I'm sorry, it says, you will find tied there a colt that has no ridden. So that is in both Mark and Luke. In Matthew, it says, you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her.
Oh, interesting. I forgot.
So, and then Matthew also makes the point. This took place to fulfill what had been spoken through the prophets, saying, tell the daughter of Zion, look, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey and on a colt, the foal of a donkey. So again, there's different different ways of telling this story.
Thank you, Dave.
So sorry, I missed that.
Oh,
Was it a colt or was it a donkey?
it was both, depending on which gospel you're reading. So,
Oh,
so
okay.
Matthew says a donkey and a colt. Mark and Luke say a colt that has never been. So yeah, different, slightly different stories, and most of y'all are familiar with gospel parallels, probably. Well, this is a.
Right, that's okay.
These are really handy, and you can also find, there's an online gospel parallel that includes all
Really?
four.
I didn't know
Mhm.
that. Wow,
Yeah,
that would be.
most gospel parallels that we use include the synoptic gospels and put Matthew, Mark, and Luke side by side. So that you can sort of see the ways that they tell the stories in a slightly different way. And it can be hard to figure out what's where because they all put different events at different points in the gospels. But if you can find, any of the parallels in parables or anything like that, it's really interesting to have them side by side and see the ways in which each of them has maybe slightly tweaked the way that they tell the story. And it helps give a really strong sense of what the concerns are of each of the gospel writers, because they're all written in different contexts and have different concerns, theological concerns and religious concerns. So, yeah.
You can pass it around if you want to. You might need Dave or me to give you a little hint on how to find what you're looking for in there.
I just look around until I.
You go as you find it. That's why I have dog-eared one page. The table of contents page does not begin until about page 30. But when you figure it out, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's so good to know, because when I started reading, I read Matthew, the Our Father, and then Luke has the Our Father, but then the verbiage is different a little
Debts
bit,
versus trespasses, yeah.
And then one said, give us our daily bread, and then one said, day by day. So I'm like, okay, which one do I cover?
You can pray either one.
I like to go with one.
Okay. Yeah, pray yes, pray the one that speaks to your heart. Mhm.
And there are different Christian
Yes.
traditions will say different things. Presbyterians tend to say debts, we tend to say trespasses. Roman Catholics tend to end earlier than we do. So
You never say.
for thine is the kingdom and the power of the Lord. Yeah.
That seems very Protestant.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I
Yeah.
had a hard time getting it out when we first started praying.
Yeah.
There's also a controversy going on, I think, in the Catholic Church about, it's not into temptation.
Mhm.
Oh, really?
That's not a Jesus-like thing.
I think that the Pope is wanting, has officially declared that it should be changed. And I think it's good. I think his reasoning is pretty sound. I mean, imagining
What
that
is
God,
the recommended change?
I don't remember,
Mhm.
but suggesting that God it might lead us into temptation seems, like you said, contrary to the loving God that we.
Yeah, Iona, prayer is. The temptation is, do not let me sin, I think, or let me sin against others, or sin to others. But so that's the word they take away temptation.
And in the Book of Common Prayer, there is an updated version of the Lord's Prayer that says, "Save us from the time of trial." So that's maybe another way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I was thinking of trial as temptation. Because we all have times of trial, whether we're led into them or by other means.
But asking for deliverance from the time of trial instead of
It's
suggesting
different.
that God might deliberately try to
Right.
test us, I guess, was a subtle but maybe important.
Important. Okay. That's really interesting. What about the cleansing of the temple? I thought it was really helpful on page 249, where kind of near the bottom of that little box that says scenic view, that Jesus' action in cleansing the temple, was it basically an attack on Rome? Rome could see it as an attack on them, because it was, this is how part of how they gathered some of their tributes and taxes, right? And Jesus is saying, you need to do away with all this. So yet another provocative, very provocative action, both within his own sects of Jerusalem as well as the Roman government. I think it's hard to realize how the Jewish leadership was really kind of the level of interactions they had with especially in Jerusalem. But I know a number of y'all have watched The Path on the show.
The Chosen.
The Chosen. This is The Path.
Yeah.
The Chosen are on the. But that gives a really interesting sense of that flavor of interaction, leadership in particular. The pressure they felt from the Roman government to behave in certain ways, and just how they interacted. This is, and I think this little box also tells us, in John's gospel, Jesus does this action near the very beginning of his ministry. So he starts off very provocatively at the beginning of John's gospel. He goes to Jerusalem 3 different times, I think, in John's gospel, and he begins with this heart of Judaism. I guess just walking through the parable of the wicked tenants, one of those deliciously difficult parables that we are immersed in right now in our Sunday readings, especially from Matthew. I found it really interesting. I can't remember if this is the question they ask in here, but on page 250, the end of the parable is kind of like in the top third of the page, where Jesus says, after they've, beaten and killed the son who is to inherit, they seize him, the wicked tenants throw him out of the vineyard and kill him. And then Jesus's concluding question is, now when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants? And it's the people who say, well, what makes sense is to put those wretches to a miserable death. Right? But that's not what Jesus is expecting. Or that's not what what will happen in the kingdom.
Might sound like a dumb question, but
There are no dumb questions.
when I read this, like after the third time, Jesus is talking about himself, right?
Perhaps, yes. I mean, it certainly seems that way.
That like it's God's vineyard, earth, right?
Right.
And then he sent his servants like the prophets to like Moses and all like everybody before Jesus to gather, and then they were all killed or one way or the other, and then he finally sent his son saying, well, they won't kill my son, and then they actually did. And so Jesus is talking about himself, and then he's saying about Judgment Day, Revelation. So then now what is the vineyard, the owner gonna do, God, when he comes, which he's referring to the return of Christ during tribulations, right?
Certainly can be that you can read these parables on so many levels, and that is definitely one true level. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, to read it on. But it's also interesting to think about just in Jesus' lifetime, if this is Jesus and they say, this is the heir, let us kill him and get his inheritance. So they kill him. What does the owner of the vineyard do when Jesus is crucified? What does God do? He brought him back. Death was not the last word. And what happened to all those wicked tenants who put Jesus to death? Right. They did not encounter deadly retribution, giving kind for kind, one death for another. That's not how God responds. And I don't know if this is in here, but is the comment about the centurion, the Roman soldier in here? Where he watches Jesus die and he's converted. He says, truly, this was God's son. They're invited. God's invitations are so subtle sometimes. But this Roman soldier didn't miss it. Truly, this was God's son. So everyone, Jesus' death is invited to see something unexpected and new about how God acts in you. That's what I said. What do you think?
Well, like you said, there's so many levels that we could read this on. I think it's important for us to be reminded by the story that we don't get to claim ownership of things that don't belong to us. And that ultimately everything belongs to God. That, if you allegorize this too much, then God really kind of looks stupid. He just keeps, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expect to get results. He keeps sending slaves, they keep getting killed. What makes them think that things are going to go any differently? But at the same time, God's love for us is so great that it might appear foolish.
Yes.
But yeah, there are a whole lot of ways to read this. I think we need to be cautious. Probably there was, on some level, the earliest people telling the story, this probably is fairly soon after the destruction of the temple.
Yeah.
There probably are those who are saying, well, the
This is
people of Israel are being punished.
And that's certainly how it got taken up in history.
Exactly. So we have to be real cautious about reading this in a way that we feel that the Jews have been condemned for their unfaithfulness. Because I don't think that that's an accurate interpretation of this story. And stories like this have been used to fuel anti-Semitism thousands of years.
And I really appreciate that you always bring that to our attention. I always forget, and you always bring it to our attention.
Okay, well, good. Because I feel like a broken record sometimes.
No, and it's important. Jesus never gave up his Judaism. Paul never gave up his Judaism. That was how they knew God and how we know God through our inheritance. What other comments, questions? These are the best you want to delve into.
I was always confused where the Jews are saying crucify and crucify, but they didn't crucify. The Roman soldiers did. But why would the Jews turn on Christ when he was a Jew and he had done all these miracles? So what made them so mad that they wanted dead?
Maybe they were cowards.
That's so interesting. Say more about that.
What?
That's so interesting. Say more about
Well,
that.
when you see all this and then believe in something, then as soon as you're challenged, turn on them and what people count. It's like, it's because you don't want to face, the Romans in this case. And
It's like peer pressure. The peer pressure alone.
and then also to the triple, they're kind of, the elite of the Israelites, they're afraid of their own people, they're kind of crazy like against them, so they have to sort of go battle.
And I think I'm right. Maybe this was in here. That Pilate was notorious for how violent he was. Just notorious. So it's scary. And Rome even recalled him, I think.
Yeah.
Because he was so over the top violent. And this would be with, all the Jewish people. I mean, and of course, some time too. But so that's about pressure.
Yeah.
So vicious and stuff that gave Jesus a chance.
Like when Pilate does, when he's
Yeah.
meeting with Jesus.
And he was.
It does read that way.
Yeah.
Why do you want to protest? What is he done?
Well, they also asked Jesus to tell him,
Yeah.
and I just felt like when I was reading this, it's like a movie almost. And you want to say, come on, speak up.
Yeah.
Tell him.
Yeah.
He doesn't say.
Just let him when you say I am.
Yes.
You know, just a lot of mob mentality with his entrance. You know, people can easily get all excited about something and they can just as quickly turn. And yeah, we're social animals, and we do tend to adhere to that sort of mob mentality almost. Kathy Boyd used to quote something from what was that alien spoof movie? Oh, Men in Black, which I've never seen.
I don't think
But apparently one of them is talking about how, you know, people are smart, you know, and the other one says, no, a person is smart. People are panicky and stupid, and they'll get caught up in anything. So interesting distinction between a person and people.
That sounds like constitutional law. It really does.
Huh.
That sounds like Jefferson.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. So
I'm wondering, and maybe we talked about it before, but it's gone. But why does Jesus always like only take care of his disciples? The same four.
Oh, that's so interesting.
The rest of it. So it was compelling. It's not like he was saying, you know, you stay here, go off the I don't get it.
I don't know either, other than he's, it's like he had kind of an inner circle. I don't know. Do you have, I guess I hadn't thought about that.
yeah.
But you're right, it's Peter, James, and John. And they're with him on the Mount of Transfiguration. They're with him when he raises Jairus's daughter. Because I don't know, that's very interesting.
You know, all the odd questions come from you, right?
No, they're not, they're no dumb questions, they're no odd questions. And a lot of these questions we have to walk into on, in our lives. Not necessarily like we're gonna get it all checked out.
Well, and I think in the movie, The Chosen One, they do kind of pick up on that Jesus has these favorites, the ones that he likes, and he picks, because he calls them who can, that come with me.
What's interesting is if these were, for whatever reason, his favorites, the Gospels don't. The only kind of tension that I can recall, you'd think that would cause some tension with the others, right? But the only kind of tension I recall is James and John wanting to be the greatest, and their mother in particular. The apostle wasn't be sure, that her sons are seen as the greatest. So that doesn't, that would be interesting if he did have these favorites. It doesn't look like there was, however Jesus lived, it didn't create tension. Yes.
I kind of looked at it as perhaps trying to test those who we thought could best carry on his work. It's like Peter became really
Yes, right.
his main builder, I guess, like they main function.
Yeah.
Even though I was rebuking Jesus, but 3 times, that's very good. Or I think the most
Interesting. It could help lead the others, like the disciples, in the wake of this death, which left everyone grieving, stunned, not what they expected.
I think you were really spot on with where you're leading that. You're answering your own question. No, because so I have 20 years of retail marketing. I work with a lot of people in different teams. and I've worked in teams of usually 12, right? And you can't give 12 people the same attention, right? So what I've always done in my 20-year career, I pick whoever's the closest to knowledge and understanding, right? Like whoever's closest. And I would really coach and teach them one more time, knowing that then they're gonna turn around and teach the others, right? So it's kind of like a concentrated group, and then that 4 will then teach 2. Like I'm gonna teach 4 and these 4 teach 2, and then it just keeps going and like ripple effects that you can have in this concentrated focus, you know, but I think that, I mean, you're spot on. You had to, yeah, I mean, that's how I thought of it when I was reading it, and I didn't think of favorites or anything like that. I just felt more like it was who was the closest to getting the message. So that, because if you brought everyone, there's all these people asking questions, you know what I mean? You got 12 people questioning, you asking questions, and now you have 4 people, and you can concentrate a little bit more.
Or typically, you also, what you might call that type of situation, you look for reliable.
Yeah.
Like, somebody to discuss things with. Honestly,
It makes sense, and also, the gospel, especially Mark, really portrays all of the disciples as complete buffoons. And they're the ones who don't get it. They're the ones who most should get it and don't. Which makes their redemption that much more powerful in a way that even if there's hope for these idiots, then there's hope for us too.
Yeah, I always think of Thomas.
Yeah, and in Matthew and
Just think it
Mark,
to believe it.
in Matthew and Mark, those are those 4 are the disciples that are called by name at the very beginning. So it's, and you know, and as I like to point out, Jesus first called casters, Peter and Andrew, were casting their nets into the sea, and then he called James and John, who were mending their nets. And so he built his church on casters and people who would maintain the church and those who would evangelize the church.
in the consulting world, they talk about 3 categories of consultants: finders, the minders, and the grinders. Find business through those who can address their ongoing needs as a and back and do all the work.
Yeah.
Takes us all.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this class.
What about, I think they ask us a really, there's an interesting question in the back here about, on page 261, questions for the journey, number 1. This is talking about the widow's mite, the offering the widow makes, as well as Jesus anointing by the woman. Jesus accuses the scribes of devouring widows' houses, like taking all their income, but praises the woman who pours nard worth a year of wages on his feet. Do you see a contradiction here? And why do you think this woman receives praise? Interesting question.
Well, nard is an oil or something, right? And it's fairly expensive from what I understand. So, yeah, she didn't think anything of using it for Jesus. And no matter the cost. My interpretation.
Yes, and is it Judas whose name here is saying?
In one of the gospel accounts, it is,
Yeah.
but not in the one
Not
we
in
have
this
here.
one. Oh, darn it. Okay, so in that gospel,
Here, it's all the disciples
okay, go ahead. That are
that
saying-
criticize her.
Yeah. Why is the ointment wasted? This ointment could have been sold for 300 more denarii and the money given to the poor. And they scold her. And I love how Jesus loves her tenderness and generosity, right? And he needs it.
Which side would you be on if you were there?
Would you?
Right, that's a good question.
Because
Mhm.
I think they're right about it, that,
Mhm.
what they said was years worth of,
Mhm.
and that could go a long way. That's kind of how I feel about that $2 billion sphere in Vegas.
Oh, wow, I don't know about
Must have
that.
missed this one.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, it's just because it's on my mind, but there's a sphere in Las Vegas that F1, Formula One race cars built for this upcoming race, and it cost $2 billion. And it's just, I'm just so overwhelmed with continued. Yeah, and it's astounding.
Well,
It's really cool, but it's
Yeah.
astounding.
yeah. And here, in terms of the money given to the poor, a lot of us kind of wonder, why would Judas betray Jesus? And one theory is, especially in the gospel, where he's the one who objects. Because at the end of this reading on page 253, at the end of the anointing reading, it says, then Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12, went to the chief priests in order to betray him. And some people think that Judas was trying to force Jesus' hand to be the kind of Messiah that was expected, right? The one who would say to the woman, that was crummy, this money should have been given to the poor. And that Judas is just horrified when he realizes he betrays him and he's, not the kind of Messiah that he longed for. Because, right, these people are poor and hungry.
Didn't you just go separate fire?
Or I can't remember how it's written in Acts, I think, right? Where does he throw himself in the fire, but he kills himself?
Well, in one, he
Right.
kills himself, he hangs himself.
So,
And I think it's in Acts that his belly splits open or something and
oh yeah.
dies. So, yeah, again, very different accounts. What happens to Judas?
It's so interesting. It's like Judas can't live with himself given this betrayal. But Peter, this is another reason why Peter's one of that core group. Peter betrays Jesus terribly, and Jesus gives him a look after he's betrayed him. And Peter weeps bitterly. But Peter's then able to see that Jesus doesn't want to leave him there, right? He's able, this is part of, our dynamic as Christians is falling flat on our face and then rising again, right? Through the power of and mercy of God. And that's what I love. One of the things I love about John, especially. So here, Peter's denied Jesus 3 times, denied knowing him, have anything to do with him. Jesus looks at him. And then when the resurrected Jesus meets them on the beach, he puts them in a fish. And he asks Peter 3 times, what are those exact words, Or he just gives them instructions, feed my sheep.
Oh,
tend
do you
my
love me?
sheep. Do you love
Yeah,
me?
you have my
Right.
love me, and he's like, of course I do.
Mhm.
You know it.
And so it's hard sometimes to walk into that kind of redemption. But Peter got it and was able to do it. Judas not.
And you talked about today during the meeting, like, prior to that, you know, to take the opportunity to love others and then show it through the actions of next time. Right? And that's exactly what I felt like reading that, and just like, if you love me, and he's like, yes, I know, I love you. And even should you love me, then, leave shepherd my, and you, everything that you said today during sermon about, how to show our love to the community, is almost like that same conversation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Heather,
Interesting that signal, I guess, Judas wants to identify who
Oh, yeah. Yeah, talk about irony. So poignant.
Where they got the temple down.
Yeah, I don't, that's interesting. Mhm.
I think for a lot of the actual crucifixion, and even the Last Supper, they are going mostly with synoptics, I think.
Yeah.
Probably because the Johannine account is so dang long. And, I find John tiresome at times, but there's some really wonderful details in John as far as the washing of the washing of the disciples' feet. And the betrayal of Judas is portrayed in a really powerful way. I feel like he went out, he shares the Last Supper with the disciples, and then he went out and it was night, and there's this sense of darkness that he's walked out into. And then just the long kind of back and forth between Jesus and Pilate. What is true? I don't know.
Yeah, and so, oh, look, it's raining. What a gift. I hope that this, if you can, you'll try to walk through all the Holy Week services. It can be tough. And, if you don't drive at night, although I think we kind of are, it's springtime and maybe the Monday, Thursday service ends before it's dark.
Yeah, it's kind of designed to end in the
Well,
darkness.
So maybe let's make a point if we can of trying, to get rides for folks. It's really, when you walk through the whole thing, Easter is so much sweeter.
Yeah, I remember when I first attended Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday services. And I'd never done that before as a young person. It's always Easter. But once I attended Monday, Thursday, and Good Friday and Easter, I never missed any of those services again, ever. Because it's so powerful. Yeah.
Well, I want to end with this couple verses from the hymn, When I Survey the Wondrous Cross. These are the last two verses. See from Jesus' head, his hands, his feet, sorrow and love flow mingled down. Maybe we should have had Dave sing it. Did e'er such love and sorrow meet, or thorns compose so rich a crown? Or the whole realm of nature mind that were present far too small? Love so amazing, so divine, demands my soul, my life. Amen. Thank you.
Amen.
I mean, the next 2 weeks, we don't have this class.
Right.
We have Thanksgiving holiday next week. And December 3rd, we have our giving fair during this class, which is a wonderful time where nonprofit agencies from the community that we support with and work with come and make presentations, and we have a chance to visit with people and hear about their work and stuff. It's a great day, a great way to start at.
Yeah. Pamphlets like we did last year about Advent.
Did we have pamphlets? Wow, okay.
I don't remember.
One was a venture through Advent and the other one was. Yeah, there were two of them.
I wonder.
We will have some advent calendars for everyone. And there's kind of a family advent calendar, but I've ordered enough for all the adults who enjoy that kind of thing to do too, because I'm one of those adults. So is Ann Stefan.
Did it have chocolate in it?
No, it doesn't have chocolate, but it has awesome pictures, kind of like on our wall from our reading. And you can interact with them by coloring. You can interact with them by, they give you a thought for every day, like opening an advent calendar door. So there's one for families and those of us who are also young at heart. And then there's kind of a more adult oriented advent calendar that we'll have for everyone. That's also really fun. So it'll just be a sheet of paper, you stick it on your fridge, fold it, put it in your path, interact with it.
Karen, I think the other pamphlet that you're talking about from last year, taking forward movement.
Oh, okay.
There's a little similar to the forward day by day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
Isn't that,
provided that.
isn't that something? Do you remember this day? I don't
I
either.
remember what happened
Yeah.
yesterday.
I know. Yeah, you'll have to help us out with that. If you find at home what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure we can look into that.
Just bring it, yeah, or bring it to the office when you come for EFM.
Okay.
Tomorrow, you'll have EFM tomorrow. Well, thank you, Tom, for joining us.
Thank you.
Blessing.
That's blessing. I'm so grateful. It's my first time being able to like sit around and actually discuss the Bible. Like, it's my favorite subject. Actually, like, that's all that's who I am. So it's just so there's nothing.
Well, thank you for your wonderful contribution.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Y'all have a great Thanksgiving, safe Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be with my